Did you want to make any comment about today's demonstration? I don't know whether I made a mistake, but my son happens to be there, and he told me there must be 1 million people here. So I said, well, does it look like there's definitely over 600,000? He said yes, and I told him to say the bracha Chacham Marazim.
That's very interesting.
Was that correct?
It's interesting that, well, first, I will just mention for the record, today is Yom Hamishi B'Shabbat, Thursday. Heth B'Mar Heshwan Tov Shin Pei Waw, that is according to our calendar. And for those who still require the Gregorian crutch, that corresponds to the 30th of October 2025. It's interesting that you asked this question because yesterday I received a message from someone with precisely that question. Is it if in fact the seeing that they are claiming that will be tomorrow over to 600,000 Jews in this place, in this event, is it correct to recite this bracha, Chacham Rozim? That was the question I was asked. I responded, and the person elaborated, explained his safek, why he was not sure that it was the right thing to do, because perhaps it's a Hilul Hashem, this event, this demonstration, or this atzeret, this gathering. First of all, I do not think necessarily that is a correct characterization of the event, to say that it's a Hilul Hashem. And even if a person feels that, I don't think that particular halacha is dependent on one's assessment or what the aims of those people gathered are. The fact is, you have there 600,000 Jews, apparently, I don't know. I wouldn't dare venture anywhere near Yerushalayim at this moment, because I would find myself sitting in traffic probably for hours. But assuming that there are that many people, I wrote to this individual, I think the bracha should be recited. Yes. So if that's what you said to your son, I think you were absolutely correct. So it seems to me. Hazal did not say if you see 600,000 Lamed Vavnikim, 600,000 Jews of outstanding character and particularly pious, then you know what is in the heart of each one, then you can recite this bracha. That is not what the halacha is. The halacha is if you see 600,000 Jews, you recite the bracha, Chacham Harazim, despite the fact that we know that Tzibur is Rashi Tevot Tzadikim, Benonim, Urushaim. There are all kinds of people within Klal Yisrael, different levels, without going into any further discussion of that point. And yet that is the halacha. As for the claim that it's Hilul Hashem, I can quote to you what I just saw before we went online now. This is from Chadshot Arutz Sheva, from whatever they call it, Channel 7 or Israel National News or whatever they call it. The head of Yeshivat HaEsder Or Yeshua, Harav Rahamim Eliyahu Zini, who happens to be, in my humble view, one of the very serious, greater Talmidei Chachamim alive today, on many levels. So I hold him in very high regard. He's an Ish MF. He does not fit into anyone's particular box or category, because that's what they want him to do. His view here is Hal Isur Muchlat Lishtatef Ba'afgana, because it causes division within the nation, etc. Ufogat Kashod B'Torat Yisrael. Despite what I just said, the high regard in which I hold Rav Zini, I beg to differ. I think that it is actually a very powerful and important message. Nothing to do with the question of whether the standard arguments that one hears in the Haredi world regarding whether Talmidei Chachamim are required to serve in the military, or anything to do with that. And some of you have heard some of the things that I've said on those matters over the past several months. Quite apart from all of that, it is extremely important, first of all, I would say, in my humble opinion, that Torah Jews, whether they are correct or incorrect about everything that they think and say, stand up and say, we will follow the Torah, as of course, as we understand it, not as you understand it, as we understand it, as our teachers, as our rabbis tell us and explain to us. And one cannot deny that they are not making this up. In other words, many Gedolei Torah, over many years, over generations, one could say, have expressed these views and these ideas. No question, it's nothing new. There's no chicanery going on here. It's entirely factual, objectively true. That this is the view, has been the view of many, perhaps it's fair to say a majority of the better known Talmidei Chachamim over the last few generations, that Bachurei Yeshiva should not go to the army. Again, one doesn't have to necessarily agree, but that is a fact. And what I find important and refreshing and positive about such a gathering of so many Jews who state this very loudly, what in fact are they stating? They are saying, we don't care what you think, because we care what the Torah thinks. And we know what the Torah thinks based on what our teachers tell us. And these rabbis tell us X, Y, and Z. That is what we believe. And we stick by that. And through thick and thin, we will stick to that position. We will not change. We will not bend. We will not bend the knee. We will not crack. You can do as you please to us. You can do your worst, and it will not change our minds in any way at all. That is a very, very powerful and important message, which has to be heard. And halawai, there were many non-Haredim, religious Jews, who would say the same thing about all manner of things. This is one of the main differences between the Haredi world, so-called ultra-Orthodox world, and the Dati Leumi, or religious Zionist world. That for various reasons, which we don't have to elaborate upon right now, the Haredi world has more or less been successful in keeping itself apart and aloof from the degenerate society round about, and that is the fact. All the societies in which we all find ourselves, wherever we may live today, are degenerate. That's just a fact. If a person doesn't know that or hasn't noticed yet, then there's nothing I can do for them. Then in that case, I think they need professional help. But if a person understands that, then the question is, how do you deal with that reality? The Haredi world decided a very long time ago, again, based on the teachings and instruction and recommendations and advice of many great Rabbanim, that we must detach ourselves and divorce ourselves to a very great extent from Israeli society. And that is the only way that we can function. And in many ways, not in all ways, and not all things they claim, and as a result of these policies, they end up themselves believing. Not all those things are true, but generally that policy, that manner of dealing with reality has proved itself of value. I will add something to that. I recently heard a certain very intelligent and perceptive Rav say the following. He does not describe himself as Haredi, nor does he describe himself as Dati Leumi. So he's independently minded. And he himself has gone through certain gilgulim over time. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. He said, Rav Kook Zitzal was a very, very complex and profound individual. And he looked at reality in a certain way. It doesn't always necessarily follow that one has to subscribe to what Rav Kook thought or believed or how he interpreted certain realities in his time, which of course is a long time ago. Most of the important things that Rav Kook wrote were written 120 years ago, 110 years ago. He passed away 90 years ago. But most of the important things that we have from Rav Kook were written well before that time. So Rav Kook saw things in a certain way, and he wrote voluminously on everything, basically, and on every area of the Torah. And I will say further that he also saw all the various facets of a reality, and therefore I think sometimes you can find what seem to be a certain inconsistencies between one statement of Rav Kook here and another statement of Rav Kook over there. That is even in the realm of thought, of philosophy, of chokhmah, but also in terms of, even when it comes to reality, in terms of when he was dealing with more down-to-earth, real-world situations, you can also see, I think sometimes you may feel, perhaps with some justification, that these various messages do not always add up to one clear direction or perspective. But even if a person says what I just said now is incorrect, and that's also fine. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I'm not wise enough and deep enough to see how you can reconcile all the various statements of Rav Kook over decades of time into one coherent picture. Perhaps that's true, and perhaps I'm unable to do so. However, what is certainly a fact is that almost all the great, all the Rabbanim and Chachamim who knew Rav Kook directly and personally, people who were his students, and people who looked up to him during his lifetime, the vast majority of them, after his time, which is 13 years before Israel was established, he passed away in Tauret Thadiyah, 1935, Leminyanam. Almost without exception, they found themselves drawn towards, or by default, they felt they somehow, to one extent or another, joined the Haredi world, or lived within the Haredi world, more than in any other world, shall we say. And on top of that, and even more importantly, it is not true, it would be entirely untrue to claim that Rav Kook, in practical terms, in terms of how to live day to day in this world, in this very, very complex reality. And one should stress, this is a reality, what we have today and what we had when Rav Kook passed away 90 years ago. We're talking about various types of reality that never existed in Jewish history prior to that time and prior to this present time, this point in time. And that is why you hear various Chachamim express different views about how to relate to this or that reality, because it's something new. Just as you find different Chachamim expressing various views about the use of electricity on Shabbat or Yom Tov, and what the reason is, and what the basis is, and what the source is, and all the rest of it, because it's something new. It's something that has not been discussed before. It's not something that is clear and plain, and something that all can agree upon. That's not the case. The same is true here. It's not unreasonable. In fact, it would be very surprising if we did not find many great Chachamim take stock of a given situation and reach somewhat different conclusions in terms of how to interpret this strange new reality on the one hand. On the other hand, whatever you think of the reality, you have to decide how you're going to navigate this reality, how you're going to live in it, how you're going to educate your children, what you're going to think to yourself every morning when you wake up. There is clearly no clear direction that one can find in Rav Kook's writings, as amazing and as groundbreaking and as unique as they are, one cannot find any clear direction in terms of how to navigate this reality based on Rav Kook's writings. Rav Kook was living in his own unique world with his mastery of Torah and his phenomenal insight and intelligence and knowledge. But he did not tell the common people what you should do tomorrow. He did not. He was spectating. He was viewing reality and interpreting it and writing about it, but he didn't tell anyone what they should do. More than anyone else, he did not tell his students exactly what they should do in a practical sense. As I've pointed out before, Rav Kook himself was not in any way officially connected to the Mizrahi, for example, nor was he at all enamored of Agudat Yisrael, not by any means. That's why he wanted to set up something different, a third way, which the name for which he chose for that was Degel Yerushalayim, something which never got off the ground. Again, because Rav Kook was not a practical person. That has to be understood. Whatever Rav Kook was, and he was truly almost a once in a millennium phenomenon, one could say, nevertheless, he was not a practical person. He was more of a mystic and a philosopher and a mekubal and all that, and a posek, anything you wish, but not a practical man of the world. Whereas certain Haredi Chachamim, for example, the Chazon Ish, not by any means only the Chazon Ish, but he was the most prominent of many Haredi Chachamim in the years towards the end of Rav Kook's life and following Rav Kook's leaving the scene. They did recommend and design a certain mode of living on a day-to-day basis, as they saw and believed it should be done, as we must do, because we have no choice. That was their decision. That was their take on reality. So the people who followed them had a clear direction. You can like it, you can dislike it, you can say maybe it needs to be revised. All of that's fine, but they were given a clear set of instructions, of marching orders, where to go, in which direction to march, and what the overall aim more or less is, or at least for now. That Rav Kook, in Kol HaKavod, did not provide. So, again, I think the fact that so many Jews are willing to get up and say, and here I will quote even the Neturei Karta, whose famous anthem says as follows, Uva Shilton HaKofarim En Anu Ma'aminim. This is a song, if you're familiar with it. Uva Shilton HaKofarim En Anu Ma'aminim, bam, bam, etc., etc. I'm not going to perform the entire song for you now. And Uva Chukothehem En Anu Mithashvim. They don't pronounce it that way, of course, but that's not the point. The point is, that statement is a very powerful statement. You don't have to be in a Neturei Karta to appreciate the truth and the power of those statements. And this, by the way, is something that's going on right now in the general non-Neturei Karta Haredi world. I've heard this from a number of sources, people who are in the know much more than I am about what goes on a daily basis in the real world, in the Haredi world. What I hear is, for example, that increasingly in standard mainstream Haredi weddings, non-Neturei Karta weddings, this anthem of Neturei Karta is sung with great enthusiasm by the young Bahorei Yeshiva. Now, there's a reason for that, and it's really fairly obvious. The point is that this is a true message. There is truth to that message. The opposite message, that we are mamlachti, that we will always fit in with the powers that be, and we will always justify what they do, and we'll always find some Torah justification and basis for what they say, and therefore for what we do. I am unwilling to accept that position or that approach. I don't think it has proved itself over time, and it's not intellectually honest, and it's not correct. In simple terms, it's not correct. Another thing that people have to understand is that you cannot take an entire large community of Jews, the Haredi world in Israel, which I think it numbers well over 10% of the population today. I believe so. You cannot take such a group of people who have existed, as we just described, based on a certain ideology and modus vivendi in the real world. Their entire outlook and way of life and educational system and economic system and whatever it may be is all based on certain assumptions and principles and understandings. One of which is that we will not serve in the military because it is one of the pillars of the secular non-Torah or anti-Torah world, and we know that this is a danger to us spiritually, and we will not participate in such a thing. And a reasonable person cannot expect, whatever the halacha is, a reasonable person, a real world person, a politician, for example, cannot imagine that you can just pass a law, assuming that you could pass a law, which hasn't happened for all kinds of reasons. One of the main reasons, perhaps, is the Bagatz, the so-called Supreme Court. In other words, the Ma'arat Paritzim, as Yirmiyahu calls it, the cave of the highway robbers in that building near the Knesset. You cannot imagine that you can just pass a law and their entire way of life will somehow change direction. That's totally divorced from reality. That's not going to happen. You're talking about people who are dedicated and believe in something, as opposed to you who believe in almost nothing. And this is what they will do. No matter whatever you do, they will continue to live their lives as they have been instructed to do by their teachers, by their rabbanim. And so without understanding that, you cannot even begin to discuss the question of Giyus Haredim, of people from the Haredi community joining the military, for example, or other aspects of living in Israel. You can't begin to discuss these matters if you do not have a grasp of these basic facts. And I believe that many people, many secular people, Chiloni people, many religious people, Dati Lomi people, do not understand these basic facts, and for that reason they cannot make any intelligent contribution to such a discussion.